Hi guys, Dr. Minkoff here. Today I want to talk about something that's really kind of interesting if you think about it. It's the causes of cellular aging. Now, most of us think our bodies just age. You know, we were 20 and now we're 40 or we're 70 and we just aged. But really, the body's made up of cells. So you could take a skin cell or a liver cell or a brain cell, and you could put that cell, if you did a biopsy, you could put that cell in a petri dish and you could grow that cell. It would grow if you had the right environment for it. You know, the right kind of a broth, those cells would grow. They're alive. They're independent living organisms, and we just happen to be a collection of about 100 trillion of them. So that's a lot of them, but they're all there and they're all alive. And so when we talk about aging, what we have to do is we have to reduce this down to the individual cell. Because if the individual cell is thriving and doing very well, then the other cells are going to do well, and they're going to age slower. There's no immortality that we know of for a physical body. But some people can age longer before they fall off the cliff, and some people start aging when they're born. You know, like they're falling off immediately. And a lot of it has to do with kind of 6 very important things. So I'm going to go through these and then we'll talk about what can we do about it. So the first one is, in every cell, so this is a cell, there is an area called a nucleus, and the nucleus is where the genetic material is. This stuff is called DNA. And it has the program for that cell. So it programs what the cell makes, what the cell does, and actually how fast the cell ages. So cells divide, and they divide, and they divide, and they only have a certain number of times that they can divide before they start to go bad. Okay? So changes that affect the DNA really affect the longevity and the health of that cell. Now, these factors are what are called epigenetic. So genetic is the genes, but epigenetic is the things that make the genes do what they do. So if you take 2 twins and you put one in an environment which has very good nutrition and very good nurturing, and you put another one in an environment where the nutrition isn't very good, their growth and their development will be different. We know that if you compare the sizes of Japanese people in general between post-war, World War II Japan, and now, that I think the average height is like 5 or 6 inches taller. Because they went from a rice vegetable-based diet, probably with some starvation thrown in, to those people move over here, and now they're eating all the crappy food that we've got, but they grow bigger, and that's all epigenetic. It's those genes are like, holy cow, we can actually get a lot bigger, we can grow bigger, we can grow taller, we can get stronger, because of the epigenetic influence on the cell, on the overall cells of the body. So that's one influence. The second one is something called telomeres. Now, a strand of DNA, okay, that has this program in it for the cell, on the end, there is genetic material which kind of preserves the ends. They're called telomeres. Every time that cell divides, the telomere gets shorter. And then it divides again, and it gets shorter. And at a certain point, that cell isn't going to divide anymore, and it starts doing bad stuff. It starts throwing out free radicals. It might become cancerous. It's not a healthy cell, and it's not a good actor. So there are all kinds of strategies these days of how can you preserve your telomeres or even lengthen your telomeres to try to age slower and live longer. Now there's a third factor in this which is now known, which is the DNA itself has some things that can, when it's plugged onto it, it stops making certain things. And when that's taken off of it, it starts making certain things. And one of the things that's understood these days is this process called methylation. This is a genetic thing. But some people don't make methyls very well. A methyl is actually just a carbon with 3 hydrogen, and it's got another spot on it where it can bind someplace. So if this is the gene, and the methyl gets plugged on there, then the gene stops producing whatever protein it's doing. And if the cell has enough protein, but it doesn't have enough methyls, it won't turn it off, and that cell keeps producing that protein, which could be a problem for that person. For example, in homocysteine, which can be an inflammatory particle, there are people who don't methylate very well, and they get excess amounts of homocysteine, which is an irritant within the blood vessels, which can cause cardiovascular disease. So that would just be an example of it. So those are the things on sort of a DNA level. So you have to keep your DNA well if you're going to survive a long time and feel well. The second one has to do with mitochondria. So in the cell, there are these little organelles. They're little organs called mitochondria. And their job is to produce energy for the cell. An average cell has 1,000 to 2,000 of them. A brain cell or a heart cell has like 10,000 of them. So the more energy that's needed for the cell, the more mitochondria. Now, if you get mitochondrial outages, it's like having a power outage. Like if we're in this room and it's raining and the lightning hits and now there's no electricity, the lights go out, the air conditioning goes out, and now we can't work. And the same thing can happen in the cell. If you get a dose of a mitochondrial toxin or slowed increasing doses of mitochondrial toxins, chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals, all these things, the mitochondria may be unstable or there may not be enough of them. And you get a power outage, and when the cell has a power outage, it can't function. So if a brain cell has a power outage, you might feel depressed, or you might not be able to sleep, or you might be very anxious. If your liver cells have power outages, you may not be able to detoxify. So you see, depending on the organ, if there's mitochondrial outages, power outages, and those cells don't function right. And what occurs when that happens is number 6, is you get waste buildup. It can't then clear itself of its own waste. You know, it's kind of the difference between a nice flowing stream, which is clean, and a pond that can't get rid of anything, that people are putting bad stuff in all the time. And if it can't get out, then that waste management problem is going to further hit mitochondria, hit the DNA, and now you have a vicious cycle, really. And that's what happens in people. They have defects where the DNA is being affected because they can't get rid of their waste. So anyone who's not having a bowel movement at least once a day is intoxicating themselves with their own waste, because this stuff goes back in the body, it goes back in the cells can't get rid of it, and it poisons their cells, their DNA, and their mitochondria. Okay? If a person's eating lots of herbicided, glyphosated foods and dyes and chemicals, they're going to overload this, and it's going to do the same thing because the body can't get rid of it. Okay? Now, inflammatory issues can occur also. And inflammatory issues have to do with mainly toxins and infections. So you get an Epstein-Barr infection, or you get Lyme disease, or you get a strep throat. Those are causing inflammatory issues. Toxins will cause inflammatory issues. And they will hit the DNA and they will hit the mitochondria. And both of these things then are going to have trouble because they can't really work. Now, the other area that we haven't talked about yet is inflammatory issues within the cell membrane. So the cell membrane is a very, very complicated structure, and it really is the brains of the cell. The DNA gets told what to do. Make more protein, do this, do that. But the cell membrane is where everything's happening, because all the communication goes through there. All the hormone receptors are there. All the what's the cell going to let in and get out is there. And when you get inflammatory changes or attacks on the cell membrane, then the cell membrane, it's almost like a supercomputer. You know, it is like a supercomputer where all this information is taking place all the time at thousands of times per second per cell. And now you get cell membrane where those proteins are damaged by infections or inflammatory challenges, and then that cell membrane can't quite behave right. We find in many people, see, in order for the cell membrane to work, there has to be a voltage there that the cell can change, so it can pull things in or push things out. Sometimes we'll look at a person's blood and we'll see the cells are all glommed up. They're just like one big stack of coins glommed up. In hematology, it's called rouleau. And the reason is the cell membrane is so out of energy and so damaged that it can't even keep itself separate from the other blood cells. And then the blood cell can't get oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, and now the circulation goes down, and now the mitochondria don't get enough oxygen, and the whole thing, all these things feed into each other, so they're all very important. We could put someone on a bed that has a pulse magnetic field and recharge the cell membrane. And you look at the blood before and you look at it after, and the blood with the recharged membrane, now it separates out, oh, it's working good. Okay? Now, AGEs. This stands for Advanced Glycylation End Products. And you get sugars sticking on these cell surfaces and on DNA and on the proteins of the cell, and they don't work right. It's almost like the glaze on a donut. And this is often looked for in if the doctor has someone who's got a borderline blood sugar or a high blood sugar, and they do a test in the blood called hemoglobin A1C. Now, hemoglobin is a protein. And hemoglobin A1C, if the sugar levels in the blood are too high, then these red cells get coated with sugar. They get glazed with sugar. And they then don't work right, and they cause more inflammatory changes. So having too much blood sugar, insulin, all that stuff is part of this cellular health. Now the other thing is the cell has a need for nutrients. It's got to have vitamins, minerals, essential fats, essential amino acids, water, and calories. Those are the requirements. And if it's low in selenium, or low in an essential amino acid, or low in an omega-3 fat or omega-6 fat, it's not going to have the right structure, it's not going to be able to operate right, and it's not going to work right. And so it won't then, the mitochondria won't work, the DNA won't work, it's more prone to inflammation, and it's less prone to be able to get rid of waste. Okay? So these are the things that when we look at someone, it's like, how are they doing on a cellular level with this stuff? And if we start testing this stuff, we can see where's the weakness, and then what can we do? Okay? So I'm going to take that up next. So the question is, what are you going to do? You got a cell, and if you think of this, okay, you're the master of all these cells. You decide what goes in, you decide what goes out. And if you think of it, okay, am I going to have a six-pack tonight? What effect is that going to have on my cells? Would that be an intelligent choice? If you wanted this cell to do as well as it could for as long as it could. Okay? So, first thing is, there's things you shouldn't do. They're just avoids. So, chemicals, toxins, heavy metals, EMF, radiation, there can be excesses of all this stuff, and it's going to poison your cells. Bad food's going to poison your cells. All drugs are poisons. Now, someone's got an emergency, they're having a heart attack, or they've got a 106 fever, and they need an antibiotic. Okay, the cell's got to have that. The cell's infected. But a lot of the stuff that people take, just Tylenol and aspirin. Tylenol kills these cells. It kills the cells. It's bad for them. So avoid those things as much as you can if you want to preserve your cellular health. Now, there's a bunch of things that you can do. So including good food. And then multivitamin. You need a good multivitamin. Our Body Health Multi is a great multivitamin. It's got all the stuff in it that cells need. And if you take a couple of them twice a day, it's going to nourish these cells because they need that, okay? Because maybe your food has it and maybe it doesn't. Essential amino acids. We don't get enough essential amino acids in our diet. And when we measure people's level in their blood of essential amino acids, 90% of the time, they're low in at least one essential amino acids, and many people are low in a lot of them. This cell can't live and work without essential amino acids. And so we have to add that. So Perfect Amino is the essential amino acid blend, which is the actual perfect one. That's why it was named that way. And that will nourish this cell and keep it so that it can make the proteins that it needs to stay healthy. Omega-3 fats is another one. These cell membranes that we talked about need omega-3 fats. And most of us in our diet aren't getting enough omega-3 fats. In caveman times, people were having something like 4 of the omega-6s to every 1 of the omega-3s. And that balance is what's supposed to be in the nerve cell membrane. Nowadays, it's probably 30 or 40 to 1 of omega-6s, those are the vegetable oils, to the amount of omega-3s, and it isn't enough. And that cell membrane won't behave right if it doesn't have the right ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. It'll be too stiff, and when it's too stiff, the circuit board of the cell membrane can't react right. The fourth one is most people are deficient in iodine unless they're eating a lot of seaweed, and most people are deficient in magnesium. And so I, in most of my patients, add iodine and magnesium as just a blanket. Let's do it, because chances are you're deficient. And of the reactions that occur within that cell, 300 of them are dependent on magnesium. So it's really important that they be there. The last thing on this first list is greens. We need lots of things like chlorophyll and these antioxidant type compounds, because cells use that to make stuff. Now there's a group of these that are specialized. So I have everybody take a greens, like Perfect Greens, take a scoop every day, because it's 10 servings of fruits and vegetables. It's got lots of these carotenoid chemicals in, which our body needs and which are antioxidants. There's sort of a list here which is like a specialized list, an extra list. So if you want to get an A on the test, then you add these to what you're taking. Astaxanthin is a very specialized type of carotenoid, and it's a very good antioxidant. And this is very good for these 6 cellular processes. About 3 of them are actually helped a lot by astaxanthin. The second one is vitamin B3. That's niacin. In order to make energy, that cell has to have niacin, and plenty of it. So supplementing with niacin can be helpful. The third one is curcumin. It's an antioxidant. It's anti-cancer. It's anti-pain. And in terms of cellular processes, curcumin is very important. So we can add that. Carnosine. The whole fatty metabolism of the cell is assisted by carnosine, of getting fats in and out and metabolizing fats. And so this is a supplement that I would add. Add 1,000 milligrams a couple times a day of carnosine, and you'll see it'll help with your aging. And the last one is resveratrol. Eat a lot of blueberries. Pterobins, these are chemicals that are anti-aging, and they're anti-inflammatory, and they protect DNA, and they're very good. So you want to add these to your diet, have these in your diet, avoid toxins, eat good food, avoid drugs as much as you can, and your cells will be happy. And when they're happy, you'll feel good. You'll have a clear brain, and you'll be able to get your work done, and your cells will produce lots of energy. And then when you go exercise, which contributes to this, and you do mind games with crossword puzzles and reading and learning new skills and find a new instrument and all these other things which are known to help with brain and body development, But primary to that is you got to feed the cell, and you got to keep the cell's biochemistry good. And if you do that, you can live long, enjoy your life, and be happy. Okay? Now, if you enjoyed this, please share it. Let other people know we're here and what we're trying to do. And if you have comments, please leave them. And if you have suggestions on topics that you'd like to hear me talk about, please add them. We look at it all, so we're going to be keeping track of you. And if you really think we're good, then like us. Okay? Hope this helps.